Hello, my fellow readers. I Dark Symphony 777 with another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to that channel, click on that bell for notifications. Leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. We're finally in the big one. The story I've been wanting to finish for a long time. Dynamic Equilibrium by Gray X. This is a story I've been wanting to finish for years. I never got a chance to actually finish the story. I got like halfway through it and I completely forgot to finish it. But now I've just recently finished it last night, and oh boy, this was something. So, before I get into the plot, I have to kind of explain what it's based off, because honestly, it's a very wacko crossover between a crime drama and a website forum, sort of kind of like SCP website, where like that. It's just hard. It's hard to describe Filaria. It's just really hard. So, but let me just describe it. So this story is a crossover between the TV show Bones. For those of you who don't know, Bones was a TV show that premiered in 2005. It was a crime drama show based loosely around the books and the lives of a woman named Kathy Reeks, who was a forensic anthropologist. She basically did a lot of crime work using the bones as a way to go after to find the murderers and stuff like that. Like I said, the TV show was very much loosely based on her, as well as the books. Like, she wrote the books about a woman named Temperance Brennan who basically solved all these crimes, and so the TV show was based off the books, which is loosely based off the author's life. Hilariously, in the Bones universe, Temperance Brennan actually does a novel series based around a woman named Kathy Reeks, who is the actual Bones sort of thing. That's not the weird part. The weird part is what it's crossed over with. This is honestly the reason I wanted to mention this is a lot of people are just gonna find out about what Filaria is and then immediately turn off. I want to actually mention this now, so that way, people will still go, hey, I still want to read that story and stuff, so they don't get freaked out by what Filaria is. Because I never even heard of Filaria until I read the story. It's like, I don't even know what it is. When I looked it up, I was like, I was kind of curious. And this is what I found. Filaria is a world created in 2008 by a person named Garbo. It is a gigantic land called Filaria, and it's full of predators, which are basically gigantic people, mostly women, and they hunt prey, which is most commonly smaller people. Yeah, it's a website for vor. Like, it's literally vor. And I know vor is like a really not for everyone, which is why I wanted to talk about it here. Because honestly, if you're gonna read a story based literally in a world centered around a fetish, people are not really gonna like the story based on the principle alone. I want to say this right at the gate: ignore the whole vor thing. Just ignore it, because this story is phenomenal. I honestly think, without a doubt, this story is probably better. No, I wouldn't say it is better than Fusion Destinies 2. I would say it's on par, but I would say Fusion Destinies 2 is just slightly better because there's a couple niggling things I'm not a fan of in the story that just really kind of fell apart. So the plot can be separated into two halves. There's the first half and then the second half. The first half is typical Bones fare. So basically what happened is a bunch of some fairies and some other predators of Falaria, including a giant named Jorah. I believe forgot her last name. Ferguson, I think is her last name is Jorah. I just know her Jorah. Her and a bunch of other people, they find a fairy named Sandra stuck to a branch. They don't know what happened because in the world of Falaria, people don't die. Like, that's the big thing with Falaria. It's like, if people die, they're most likely in. So everyone's like trying to figure out, it's like, a fairy died, but she's not eaten, but she died. There's a body, there's a corpse here, but she wasn't eaten. And so Jorah, who we'll find out in the very first, in the prologue, saved Bones from like a couple cartel members, and so Jorah remembers that, decides to, I know who we can get to help us. So Jorah gets a bunch of some fairies, some cat girls, some wizards, and they go and kidnap. I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. They kidnap Bones and the gang into Falaria. They freak out because literally, I'm not even joking. The first thing they go is like, magic's not real. Magic's not real. They go into the portal. They come out Falaria. It's like, oh no, magic's real. And they're like, well, Falaria's something else. And then out comes a fairy going, oh yay, people got talking about you. And then here comes a fairy just eating people. And she's like, who's wrong? and everyone's freaking out like, oh. So the entire first half of the story is basically just a Bones thing where they're basically trying to solve the murder of Sandra the fairy. That's fine. Like, it's typical Bones fare. It's just very much a very Bones formula. Like, it's like if you've seen any episode of Bones, it just basically plays like that. They go through all these scenic routes, they go through all this experimentation, trying to find out everything about Falaria, because they're in a world where no one's really studied this sort of thing, because again, literally everyone has died by being eaten. Like, Falaria has like magic that's actually improves people's bodies so that way they don't really age, they don't really die when they get sick. They immediately get cured by the world of Falaria itself. So really, anyone ever finds out how to die is just they get in the stomach of a bigger predator. Yeah. And they don't know, and the Bones crew, they don't know anything about this world. They don't really know anything about the fungus, the plants, and the whole situation with like everything. They just really don't like the fact like we don't want to be in. Just don't eat us, please. And so over the course of the story, they kind of slowly unpiece a bigger. Sorry. I just was how this huge controversy. Sorry, I'm just still exhausted. This huge controversy that's surrounding various factions of Falaria, with the big city in Negav, with Nekomura, with the Iceland Fist and the Magicrat, and the Vishamals, that's what I was trying to say, and various other fairies and stuff like that. They find out that it's basically one big gigantic coup that's basically supposed to basically start in like revolution of the world of Falaria and basically invert the ecosystem sort of thing. So I'll talk more about it when I get to the characters, but I just want to say I'm still on the first part. Along the way, they meet all these colorful characters. Like they meet Kai, which is a sword naga, which she has like armored plates, and she's very stern. She's very strict. She has like a code of conduct. She wears like a kimono. Like, it's kind of weird reading a T-rated story and like 80% of the characters are like butt naked. Just find that weird. No, just me. But yeah, as they go along, they find the assassins are coming after them, like a slug girl, and Bones has to basically fight them all. So she basically, and they slowly unravel this conspiracy of everything going on. Like there's fairies. There's the fact that Chandra was training something, possibility of coup. Fairies may have been involved, maybe a frost fairy, and then they eventually find out that a character that they were with the entire time, a fairy by the name of Exona, was basically more or less the person behind all of it. And that kind of segues into the second half of the story, which reveals that Exona was the brains behind the outfit, along with her lover, Anton Garado, who basically wants to... I'll talk more about them in detail when I get to the characters, because there's a lot to talk about those two characters. Who basically they really do want to invert the ecosystem and do a bunch of things involving like multiple coups, going back to Garado's homeworld to basically just take over it and stuff like that. Basically, they were revolutionary sort of thing. And then we get to the second half, where they basically destroy the giant tree where all of them were at. They stab Crisis, who is the mascot of Filaria. She's like she's the face of the whole world. Like she's everything that Filaria is. Crisis survives, and they start a big coup. They start planning everything, and then the last 10 or so chapters is just one gigantic war scene with like constant fight scenes and constant like both Bones and Booth and their counterinsurgency trying to outsmart Exona and Garada's insurgency, and they're basically just trying to outsmart each other over and over again until eventually Exona and Garado finally lose. They managed to save everything. They save everyone. Lots of people died. And Booth and Bones and everyone, they go home. And then they, start like I didn't want to gloss over. There's a reason I more or less glossed over the second half of it, because it's kind of samey, because there's not really much in the way of like very complicated plot. Because it's just setting up for the war, and then literally the entire 80% of the second half of the story is just that one thing, just one gigantic battle that stretches over several chapters, with Exona completely figuring out what Bones was doing and then counteracting it, and then Bones and Booth are kind of basically able to figure out what she was going to do and counteract it. And it was basically just a big back and forth battle between between them. But there's a lot of characters, and that's pretty much the reason why the story is so good. Is there's a lot of characters. There is a shit ton of characters. I don't curse slightly, but there is a shit ton of characters. Let's start with probably the two biggest characters, and that is Garado and Exona. So I'm going to have to talk a lot of detail for these two. So, I want to preface these two characters by doing a quote by German philosopher Friedrich Nursing. Crap, I forgot how to pronounce his name. I completely forgot who name. Yeah. By Friedrich Nietzsche. He who fights monsters should see to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze for long enough into the abyss, the abyss gazes also into you. That is one of the that's probably his most well-known quote. Friedrich Nietzsche is a very controversial German philosopher. Like, he's known as like the person who created existentialism. He's one of the founding fathers of psychology. Although rightly, he never really dug that deep into excuse me, dug that deep into it like Sigmund Freud. He's also one of the founders of postmodernism, stuff like that. I'm not going to go into any detail, but there is a very specific reason why I'm doing this quote. And that is because this quote not only encapsulates these two characters, hence why I didn't say, hence why I'm saying it for these two specific characters, but also the story as a whole. There is a lot of thematic framing of the story in this quote, because this is a quote where humanity is not at the top of the food chain. They're not. There's giants, there's driders, which are basically gigantic snake women, fairies who can grow gigantic, naga like Crisis, mermaids, harpies, all of them like at the very smallest, like 60 feet tall. At the tallest, we have like, I think Crisis is like, she's like 150. I think there's maybe some species bigger than her, but I think she's like one of the biggest. So I'm just using her as an estimate. But this is an example of this specific quote used in a macroism. So basically, this whole world is basically an example of this quote, because you have these people, all these people who hunt smaller people, but then you find out there is an ambience that's basically compelling them to do that. So it's like they're monsters who don't want to eat monsters, but then there's also giants like Jorah who have very specific rules. They don't really eat a lot of humans. Like, for a specific Crisis, she will eat people unless you're friends with her. She's like, I'm your friend, so I'm not going to eat you. And there's like humans who are like okay with the predators eating other prey because they're not being eaten. There's a little tribe called the Alsumi who are basically just tiny people like Tom Thumb sort of thing, and they're getting hunted by cat people. And it's just a very complex ecosystem. And like I said, the reason I wanted to do this quote and talk about this here is because this quote is basically the main basis for these two characters, the main two antagonists. So let's start with Gerardo. Gerardo is honestly the weaker of the two, mainly because when we're introduced to him, he was kind of bigged up at the beginning as like the main antagonist, but then the moment Exona got caught and was revealed to be the bad guy, she completely shafted him out of the way. Honestly, it was very annoying because it kind of slightly wasted his character. He's still a good character. Like I said, he's still a good character. It's just Exona completely just shafted him for the most part. So his chick he's obsessed with the story called Antonio. So the story of Antonio is a Deloran tale, which is where Delura was a oligarchy, and there's this man named Eltono. I keep saying Eltonio, but I think it's called Eltono. I can't. Like, it's just that random I just can't remember. It just makes it so hard to pronounce it. And he was just a normal guy who was basically doing his trade, but then he realizes these guys are a piece of shit. He wants to rebel against the DeLorean government, but he doesn't have a reason to do it. And then he meets a person called Yordesley, who was this woman who gives him the courage and gives him a reason to fight the government, who fights the DeLorean government. So he basically starts a massive coup, a massive insurrection, revolution, however you want to say it. It basically overthrows the DeLorean government. And Gerardo fancies himself as sort of a reincarnation of that tale. So he's basically the same thing. He was just a normal soldier. He was brought down from like a very rich social family. He was very influential, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to be a soldier. He was put in Falaria. He realized how Delora is basically just sending millions of troops to Falaria. They're getting eaten, and he doesn't want that to happen. Garado gets chased by a Naga. We'll talk about the Naga in a little bit. And then he meets Exona. So they kind of wondered what... They kind of realized that they're kind of the second coming of El Tono and the Ordesley. So they start this massive plan to basically invert the ecosystem. And what they do is this is where the quote comes in the picture, because the whole point of He Who Fights Monsters is a character who wants to do good, but then they quickly they basically go too far, and they don't realize that they're becoming as bad as the people they're fighting, or even worse. And that's basically what happens. So there's basically a couple who want to help the people, and I'll talk about the whole Falarian thing when I talk about Exona. But Garado is a good antagonist. He's a human. He has a cool fighting style. He actually has he's able to use light to fire, to blind, and basically cause like all these cool light-based attacks. He's a really cool villain. I just really like him. It's just the worst part is just he gets shafted by Exona, like completely shafted. It's like I wanted to dig more into his character. Sure, he's just a typical revolution, like an extremist revolutionary. What you see is what you get. Yeah, it still would have been cool to actually dig more into his backstory and stuff like that. We did get bits and pieces here and there, or like he really didn't like the fact that his father is just basically one of them, and he's like, I don't want to. And his whole I really don't want to kill people sort of shtick, which is a neat wrinkle. I usually like these revolutionaries who are like really, they're like very, very ready to kill anyone who doesn't agree with them. I'm having like weird, I don't know, I'm thinking of something weird. But Garado's a good villain. Then we get to Exona. Exona is basically the inverse of Valkyrie. Dynamic Equilibrium and Fusion of Destinies 2 written by the same author. Exona is pretty much the same thing backstory-wise with Garado. The problem is we don't really know a lot of her backstory. I'm guessing that there might be a sequel. The last two chapters were just basically nothing but sequel hooks. So we might get more with her backstory and stuff like that. But here's the skinny with Exona. She's a frost fairy who basically fell in love with Garado and was ostracized by her own people because she didn't eat humans. She saw people as people. And so her part, the whole Falarian part, was cause the collapse of the Negavian government, basically, and cause that to collapse, have them take over, have her, Garado, and like a couple other subordinates become gods, fight the Guardians, and get rid of this ambiance that basically stops the predators from readily eating prey. Because Exona's whole excuse, whole shtick is she hates the fact that people get preyed on. She hates predators hunting the prey. She hates them eating people. And so Exona, basically, her part of the whole plan was she wants the prey to fight back against the predators, so predators would eat the prey less and less. So that way she can go, these are not just meals for you to snack on. These are people. They have families. They have friends. They have lives. They have hopes and dreams. I want them to be happy and fight for what they believe in. Work harder. Work smarter and faster, not harder. Work smarter, not harder. I believe that's the phrase. It's smarter and something. Work smarter and faster, not harder. No, work smarter and harder, not fast. It's smarter and something, not something. I'm just a little tired right now. But yeah, she's probably even worse than Garado, mainly because it's very odd. Like, you couldn't really tell with Garado that he's kind of going off the deep end, but with Exona, you could really tell that she's completely bonkers. Because she's very much willing. She's also very much a hypocrite. Like, she just like Garado, she's basically like, I don't want to kill people, and yet in like the halfway point of the story, she basically tries to kill Crisis, because Crisis was basically everything that Falaria stands for, so it would be like a moral, symbolic victory sort of thing. But that speaks a lot. Like, she constantly... Sorry, I thought my stepfather came home. She talks a big game, but she doesn't realize she's far out of her league, because of the simple fact that she talks how she's so, she's able to smart and stuff. Like, she lives by the philosophy that fear has to be beaten. Like, it has to be defeated. And if she doesn't, then you're better off left by the wayside. Like, she basically encourages these other people and predators that saying that you should not be eating people. You should not be eaten. You should be able to fight back, so that way they don't eat. So that way they don't eat you. And she does it by like literally saying, "You enter that predator's mouth." I don't want it. You don't want to be eaten? You don't want to be eaten? No. Then you'll go in that mouth. The predator won't swallow you, and then and then she'll open her mouth and let you free. But yeah, that's pretty much her stick. Like, but she has the inverse problem as Valkyrie, and the fact that Valkyrie's main problem in Fusion of Destinies 2 was she was built up magnificently. Like, with Valkyrie's character, when we're first told about her, it's literally a massive info dump about everything we know about her. What she does, what she's like, her motivations, how she's accomplishing everything. We're given a massive info dump right at the beginning of Fusion of Destinies 2. And then we meet her. And the reason why I love Valkyrie so much is she's just a magnificent deconstruction of the Sue archetype. But the reason I say that is Valkyrie is a very well done three-dimensional character. It's just with everything in her backstory, everything we've learned from the info dump, everyone around herself and everyone around her deluded themselves into thinking that she was a perfect person. She didn't have any weaknesses. She didn't have any flaws. She could literally say the most outlandish things. Everyone will laugh at her, and then they'd be stunned silence when she's able to do it with no explanation besides, "I can do it," which is, part and parcel of what a Mary Sue is. And her character arc in Fusion of Destinies 2 is her slowly going through the process of realizing that she's not perfect and struggling with that perception. Like, that's what makes Valkyrie's character so compelling. She's a flawed character who's deluded herself into thinking she's perfect, that she is a Sue, and then struggling with the realization that she's not perfect, that she has weaknesses, that she has flaws, because her whole plan banked on Harry Potter saying yes. Harry Potter said no, and then she slowly starts to unravel and tries to comprehend and tries to figure out what's going on. Why is she fit? Why did this not go well? Why did he say no? Why did all this happen? And then the big problem with her at the end, when we finally got to her, is it just didn't live to the expectation. Exona is the inverse, because just like Valkyrie, there was a predetermined final battle going, like, leading up to it, with Bones and Exona, because Exona and Bones, they are very similar in character, in that they're both heavily logic driven. They're both bound by a sense of duty. They are both bound by the idea of helping others, and they're just very similar characters. I can go on and on about the similarities, but those are the big things. They're very logic driven. They're both very determined in what they want. They both believe in justice, and that leads to a situation where, in their own strange way, both Bones and Exona are right. It's like a similar thing to Raiden and Stephen Armstrong from Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, where they both had differing definitions of what's right and wrong and the idea of strength. And in a weird sort of way, they were both right in their own way. It's just, with Armstrong, he went too far. He's just another example of someone going too far for what they believe in. But then again, Stephen Armstrong is completely different because he's a social Darwinist. He knows what he's doing is bad, but he's just trying to do it because he thinks is the only way to actually get what he wants, which is basically transforming America into a social Darwinist state. With Exona, she's completely convinced that she's a good guy and she wants to help people, but doesn't realize that what she's doing is worse than what Valeria has already, and more or less what the Guardians have done, which has just been like, they're just gonna stay hands off and leave the ecosystem as is, while Exona is gonna completely terraform the entire ecosystem of an entire dimension inside out and try and kill a bunch of gods and then slowly take over Delura. And of course, stuff with megalomania, they'll never stop. They'll go to other dimensions and just basically fix those. It's typical megalomania. But the problem with Exona's character, hence why I said she's basically the inverse of Valkyrie, is it was so hard to get invested in her as a villain. As a character, she's good. Like there's a difference between her as a character and her as a villain. As a character, I like the whole idea of her. Basically, she's basically like an evil version of Bones. Like that's basically her thing. And as a evil version of Bones, she's good. She's great even. The problem is, I couldn't take her seriously as a villain because she kept raiding around. She kept rampaging around with all of this revolution stuff. We have to overthrow this and all the patient waiting. And yet, she spends half the story getting her butt whooped. She does everything herself, so for example, in the tree battle, she more or less does most of the work by herself, which is fine, but the problem is that basically just makes everyone else just seem worthless. But then when it gets to the big battle, she's basically just spends half the time just standing around, getting beaten up by a bunch of fire-based fairies, two demons, and a harpy. And then she gets beaten up by another fairy, and she gets to another fight with other fairies, and then she fights Bones, and I actually really like the fight with Bones because it's more cerebral, as in it's just basically Bones turning all of Exona's philosophies against her and basically doing that. But it's just, I couldn't, and they made it, and there was a specific line where they basically said, well, even America was founded on like war and the revolution, basically referencing the whole Revolutionary War that basically gave birth to America. And they were right in the sense that, in the Revolutionary War, people died for what they believed in. They were willing to kill. And while it's a neat wrinkle that they didn't want to kill people, at the same time, it completely left Exona toothless as a threat because she didn't kill. It's a weird oxymoronical situation where she believes in not wanting to kill people, but that actually makes her completely worthless as a villain. I mean, yeah, it makes her more compelling as a character, but it's at the cost of weakening her as a villain, as an antagonist, and that's really the big problem I have with her. Like, okay, she doesn't want to kill people. Yeah, she attempts to kill Crisis. Yeah, there's some thematic irony and hypocrisy right there. But Crisis survives. And she does like all these PR spins to try and keep everything stable as much as they can. But then she doesn't want to kill anyone. She just gets to keep everyone away from the Isolani, so that way they become gods and not getting. So that way they can fight the gods and stuff like that. But the simple fact is, it was just the more I read along for the second half of the story, the less I felt liking her as a villain. Like I said, as a character, she's good. She's really good. But as the story went on, she became less and less interesting as a villain simply because she didn't have any weight behind everything. Again, compared to Valkyrie, we got the info dump. We were literally, when we're first introduced her, she takes them to Atlantis, basically shows all the fruits of her labor, that she basically made Moaning Myrtle mortal again. She turned Harry's rude aunt into a Kappa. She basically gave a guy an ability to do 2 wands. So it's like we're seeing how far she can take. She is willing to take things, and over the course of the story, when we see her fight, the bad guys need a moral victory, Valkyrie and all her troops assault Hogwarts and basically just curb stomp everyone. It's not even a back and forth. It's just Valkyrie curb stomps everyone, and she's very much willing to kill Harry Potter. It's just Haggard and the tall giant lady he's like dating saves them in the nick of time, and they're able to hold back Valkyrie just enough to get them out of there. But it instantly sells how dangerous and how threatening Valkyrie is. Hold on. While with Exona, we're not given any such thing, which just makes her weaker and weaker as a villain, because I'm just slowly starting to just not really care about her in that way. Plus, there's also the fact in the entire first half, she does act as an exposition fairy. She basically goes over certain details to Brett, to Bones and Booth and the team, and by extension, us the readers, over all the little minute details of Fellaria, how Nagav works, the Isolani Eye, the Isolani Eye Nikos, Safe Harbor, the giant tree, the whole ecosystem sort of thing. All the little details that most readers who are not interested in looking up Fellaria would want to know. In that instance, she works in that way. She's very bland because she's just very generic. It got to the point where I was actually convinced that people would like misinterpret her as a Mary Sue simply because of how just boring she is, and how just bland, like everything seems to go right for her. But then of course, once it was revealed, she manufactured everything and did that on purpose. So the reveal of her being a villain just saves her from being completely boring. Like, I wouldn't call her Mary Sue, even if she kind of kept the same. I think she would have just worked as a good exposition character, just giving us information about how Fellaria worked and stuff like that. It worked. She worked in that way, but I would have just said at best that she was just boring. I wouldn't have said anything really bad outside of she was boring. Then she became a villain. She got a ton better, but then it kind of petered out over the simple fact that she was just completely worthless as a villain. And those are just the 2 big ones. We got the Bones and her crew. For the most part, they say congruent to how they acted at that point in time. At the time, Brennan is actually like 1 month pregnant. So the entire story is she's just actually like 1 month pregnant. She's not showing and stuff like that. In terms of important characters outside of Bones, we have Lasona. Lasona is an interesting character because the story basically heavily implies that she's going to be that if there's a sequel, she's going to be the one of the two main villains, and I'm actually more intrigued as her as an antagonist than I ever was with Exona. That's just a sad truth. I really liked Lasona. I loved her little shtick with Natalie, like this stuffy, over-the-top political dynamo, charismatic. She's kind of charismatic. She's basically very calm-faced, and then like she becomes friends with this masochistic, very fight-obsessed nympho fairy, and it's like, hey, Lasona, you want to do something? Kill me now. Balthasar! No, I'm not gonna. No. That doesn't actually happen that specific thing doesn't happen in the story, but you get my point. They kind of make like strange bedfellows. I love their dynamic. Natalie, she more or less just appears in the like exclusively in the second half. I like Natalie. It's just she's basically what I described to her. That's pretty much it. She's just a nymphomaniac, masochistic, very fight obsessed fairy. Now we get to probably my personal favorite character of the story, Kai, the Sword Naga. Basically, she was basically a badass. I loved her character. She was introduced to us being kind of acting very antagonistic because it turns out she was actually a test subject for this biochemical weapon that Exona created to basically control the harpies in order to spread the virus around. And Kai was actually a test subject to kind of test that, but she managed to overpower the virus through sheer willpower. Like she didn't get an immunity. No, she literally resisted the effects just through sheer willpower. And this whole virus is basically zombifies predators. Like it's specifically designed to hypnotize and possess predators until they go mindless. And they become hypnotized, and Kai managed to resist that just through like, no, I am a samurai, Fugo began, whatever you want to call it, and I will beat this. And she's basically everything she does, everything she says, I love. She basically does a lot of badass. Like during the big battle, she's the one who basically does like a huge number on Exona. Exona's like fighting these the two demons, the fairy and the harpy, and she's like, what's coming next? And then here comes Kai. He's like, surprise! And basically beats the crap out of her. And at this point in the story, they're near the Isolon Eye. The Isolon Eye is a item that basically resists predators, and since Exona and Garado are basically tampering with it, it basically shuts it down. It switches any predator who just likes to eat people to just any predator, and so they all have, like, all the fairies and all the predators have to wear, like, special headgear. But Kai, like, her headgear completely shorted out, but she still went to the literally right next to the eye. She's like blood is coming out of her eyes and her nose, and she's still laying the smackdown through like, and she's still like right in front of it, just pounding Exona through like sheer willpower, and it's just completely badass. I love Kai. I want to see more Kai. I really do. I love her character. Just having her just completely, not to mention I love her character arc. Like she went from a big loner and then she slowly kind of warmed up to the rest of the team and stuff like that. There's other characters too, like there's Lily, who was a fairy who got killed, whose clan got killed by humans, and she started to resent humans. But that when Chandra died, she really didn't trust Booth and the team because they were messing with Chandra's remaining. She's like, I don't want you to touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it. But then, over the course of the story, she slowly starts to warm up to them. Like, she begrudgingly accepts them. Mostly Booth, but she begrudgingly respects them to the point where, you know, you're not that bad. I still hate you. I still hate humans, but they're not bad. And even there was a point where like Booth was even like he would actually like to spend more time with Lily, trying to get her warm up to humans more. But yeah, there's also Relena, who's basically the daughter of Natalie. She kind of has a thing for Sweets, which is like the psychologist of Bones' group. I mean, I actually like it. I think it's like a whack out idea, but then again, Grey X, like in Fusion of Destinies 2, he basically is having Samus Aran hook up with Fred Weasley. And he somehow made that work. Kinda, because they didn't really officially hook up in that story. The author just planted the seeds there. But I think making that work, if you can make that work, you can make a young psychologist and a crazed, very obsessed with fighting work. Like, come on, I want to see that. I want to see that. And finally, the last two characters I want to talk about are Crisis and Vivian. Crisis is basically, like I said before, she's the face of Philaria. She's peppy. She's like a go-getter. She's basically kind of like a bimbo. Yeah, bimbo works in this situation. She's basically cheerful. Like I said, she has like a special thing where she doesn't really pick up. Like, she doesn't really eat anyone who's not friends with her. Like, if you're friends with her or you're friends with another predator, she won't touch ya. It's like, no. Crisis, you gotta resist eating them. I like the twist that the reason why she was very, very hungry was because she was actually under the effects of the virus, but a more subtle version, to kind of build up her reputation, so that way when she does die, it meant so much more to the bad guys. I love that detail. I really did. Like, usually when it comes to like hypnotizing, you know, it's one way, like, oh, you do this and this, but I really love the twist of the subtle hypnotizing, specifically to kill her up, to build up her image, so that way when she does die, it means so much more, and that made everything really cool. But yeah, I still really loved Crisis' character, like her becoming more caring, like, and even like the people in the Nagav when they're in the big time, when she actually shows up to stop Jade, who's another giant under the effects of the virus, and she says that everyone starts freaking out, like, oh my god, Crisis is like, and even Exona's like, no, I killed her, and everyone's like freaking out, like, no. This is Crisis we're talking about. And they're kind of surprised that she's actually defending them and fighting Jade and stuff like that. Vivian. Vivian is a Naga who's basically a spellcaster. She's very, very lascivious. She's very, very sexual in personality. Half the stuff she says is like innuendo-laced. She's a very nice. I really like the subtle nuances of her character. She's probably the biggest of the main crew. She's probably the character who develops the least, mainly because she just acts as more of a anchor for everyone to be around, of just dispensing some advice here and there. But she really does work in that situation, and I really love her talk with Brennan at the end. I'll talk about more about that in a little bit. But I do love her character. I love, the whole thing with Paquaxa, which was another member of the antagonist group. And I could go on and on. Like, I can talk about Jorah, I can talk about Paquaxa, I can talk about Inksa. There's a lot of characters, but I think outside of maybe Jorah with like her clumsiness, and I love the dramatic irony, like Jorah technically started the whole events by saving Brennan, and then like at the end where like Jorah is the one who basically stops Exona by just grabbing her and then basically sambling her into Isolon Eye and saving Brennan again. I really, really love a lot of these characters. Like I said, even Exona, as flawed as she is, she really is poorly done as an antagonist. She's still a compelling character with her connection of loving Sherlock Holmes and Dune and stuff like that. She's still a compelling character. She's just not a good antagonist. But there's a lot of characters. There is a shit ton of characters. I mean what I said. I can literally dedicate an entire hour just talking about all the characters that debuted and what they did and how they did. But I think I kind of talked about them more than enough. But overall, I really loved all the characters. I loved what they did. I love what they brought to the table. Even, like I said, even Exona and her very flawed as an antagonist, she's still a compelling character that I still actually loved. I just really wish we could have saw more of her backstory. But that's just me. Grammar error and sentence structure. I really loved how the sentence structure of the story. There's not much grammar errors. I think I saw maybe one grammar error. Honestly, can't remember where it was. I think it was somewhere. I'm trying to remember. I think it was when they first met Vivian. I think so, but I'm not 100% sure. It's something to do with Vivian. I just can't remember what specifics it was. But I like the sentence structure of the wording and how everything was done in the context of who the story was focusing on. So when the story focused on Bones, it was very methodical. It was very... And this kind of crosses over into pacing too. I might as well say this is part of pacing too. The story is very methodical and slows down because of Bones' logic-driven mindset and her trying to congest everything in her own very heavily logic-ridden way. So the story uses a lot of big words. It uses a lot of subtle nuances in how these words are just basically having to articulate. With Booth, it switches from overly complicated to like very blunt and to the point to just very, 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 very simple writing. With Vivian, it does a lot of like kind of innuendo-y stuff, despite the fact she doesn't really show up a lot. With Exona, it's very, very propaganda. With Exona, it's very propaganda-ridden. Like, she's constantly repeating her mantras and saying how she's gonna win, and she has to win, and she has to succeed because she has to free the people of Falaria. And that's the same thing with Garado, just not to an extent, because the story doesn't focus on Garado as much as Exona. And I like the nuance, the pacing, and the sentence structure, and the writing itself is completely dictated by who the story is focusing on at any moment, and it's very subtle. Like with Booth, like when it switches from Booth to Exona, like there's not really much of a difference, but if you're able to pay attention, you can easily see who it's focusing on really quickly just by looking at the minutiae of the words chosen and how they're formulated. It's a really nice detail, and I just really love this. I really love this story. It's just there's so much intricate detail of like so many of it focused on so many different characters. Like there's just so many crazy characters that I really encourage everyone to read the story. Which kind of, but anyway, back to it's very nuanced in the writing and how everything is done. And that leads into the final part. Would I recommend this story? Yes, I really love this story. With a caveat. Not everyone, and I will say this, not everyone's going to be into the ideal four. Like, and there are times in the story where the predators do eat the prey. Like, when they first enter Falaria, the first thing they see is a fairy just basically picking up a trap and just eating humans, and then like all the other predators are like saying too soon. So yeah, there's actual people being eaten in the story, and there are people who are not a fan of 4. I would encourage anyone who's squeamish about Vor, ignore the fact that there is Vor in this story and just focus on the merits of the story. But I understand that people are not fans of this fetish. Like, I'm not a fan of the fetish. But I still will gladly say I will defend this story to hell and back. I will die on this story's hill and say this is a good story. This is a very good story. This is a great story. But I can't control what other people's taste, and there are going to be situations where people, they look up what Falaria is, they realize it's Vor, and they're going to go, I'm out, and not read it. There are going to be people like that. And I can't convince, and I won't be able to convince those people, despite the fact I even say, ignore that, and just enjoy the story for what its merits are. Favorite part, it would actually have to be the final conversation between Bones and Vivian at the very end of the story. Because, okay, so they're there for a couple weeks at that point, and they're witnessing Safe Harbor being built up. And so Brennan is like looking around, looking at all the people, seeing the people are kind of still wary about prices and stuff like that, but they're kind of becoming accepting. And then Vivian slides up and starts a conversation with Brennan. And the conversation just basically puts the entire story into perspective of what Exona does, because a big part of Brennan's character arc in this story is her constant thoughts over the fact that even if they do solve this and they leave, Falaria is just going to go right back to what it was, because, and it's even subtly implied that Brennan on some level even agrees with Exona. She doesn't agree with her methods, but she agrees that what she was doing was, in a twisted sort of way, still trying to help the people of Falaria, help them survive better. And Vivian basically shows Brennan the entire town of New Safe Haven. And she says, look at these people. They're more trusting of these predators. They're helping each other. They're nicer. They're less wary of what's going on around them. Maybe all this is going into what Sandra and even Exona wanted, but just in a more peaceful way, in a way that they didn't want, but a way that would make more sense in the natural scheme of the ecosystem and stuff like that. It was a very touching conversation, because it's literally just a big part of the epilogue of just Vivian and Temperance talking. I thought it was really sweet. I was actually very tempted of putting Bones versus Exona at the end, because I really liked the final fight between Bones and Exona, just using everything that Exona executed against her. Yeah, and then basically throwing out her knowledge back in her face and just saying, you're delusional. But I can't help but not like that conversation between Vivian and Bones. I really loved it. I thought it was very sweet. It was basically a nice little bow on the plot as a whole. And it was just a very nice conversation. It didn't carry any weight. It just says Exona wanted people to change, become more accepting, and now because of all this, because of what you did, Brennan, not what Exona did, people are becoming less wary of predators, and people are, who knows, maybe Falaria may change. And that's pretty much my favorite part. And it was just a very nice, sweet moment. That moment is really why I really started loving Vivian. Like, I know it took until like very last part of the story to like really love Vivian as a character, but that conversation was just too sweet not to really love. What would I change with the story? One thing. Have someone die. Anyone die. It would have made Exona's weight and actions carry more weight. Like, there was a part where Exona's fighting Natalie in the Delorean base, and she basically locks all her troops up and starts infesting them with the virus. And she's using it as a way to get Natalie to back down. Natalie falls off, still fights her, but then Exona manages to beat her and basically stun her for long enough I thought that would have been the perfect moment for her to go around. Like, she knocked out the troops, and then she turned around and keep spraying them and let them die. But no, it's like the implication is like she let them live, so that way they can better spread the word over people not dying. Like, I don't. It's worded very weirdly. Like, it's in the fact that you don't know if they live or die. I think basically all her actions and everything would have carried more weight if she killed those fairies, or if not the fairies, literally have her kill anyone else. Like, just anyone, even tangentially. Like, if she killed Crisis, I mean, that would have been a huge symbolic victory. It also would have made, literally, it would have made, like, oh, Crisis, the symbol of Falaria, of what Falaria stands for, died. It's going to give them a huge boost. Yeah, I knew it was going to go either one way. Either she died, and it was a huge symbolic victory, it would have made her actions carry more weight, or she lived and she basically showed up at a crucial moment to basically save the day, which is what the latter happened. But it would have made her a million times better antagonist if she killed someone. It didn't. As long as it was a character we at least knew, it could be anyone, like Crisis, Jorah, Jade, not Vivian. Vivian was nowhere near there. She could have killed Kai. I would have been pissed at her if she killed Kai. Even like one of the succubuses. Like, she killed one of the succubuses. It just would have put a lot of weight behind what she was doing, and that just really, really hurts. That's the reason. Like, that's why I just really don't like her as an antagonist. She just doesn't. She's just so toothless. Oh. Just literally have her kill anyone. If you want to have her kill those nondescript fairies, that would probably be the best situation. But if not those, have her kill someone, just any named character who's a member who lives in Falaria. Hell, you can even have Gerardo kill Remus, or Mezis, or Relena, or Zycra, or Atreus. There are so many characters that you could easily have had her kill. Well, she didn't kill anyone because symbolism, but some stories just work so much better when a character dies, and this was one of those stories where it just made so much sense to have a character die, but no one died, so it just... After that change, in terms of prediction, I think maybe we could have got a big old lore dump. So there's a part where Booth summons a demon, and her name is Messian. I more likely butchered that. And Messian basically offered the chance to help out under the condition she challenges Booth to a chess game. So I think a good side story would be Messian, like, okay, so they're in Bones and Booth are in their house. You get a knock on the door. Well, Booth wonders who that is. He opened the door. He sees Messian, his height on the door. He closes, like, Bones. And basically Messian, you can even have Lily come with her, more or less just to talk with Booth and stuff like that. Because I think Lily, we still need to work on Lily's character. I just think we should at least explore her character a little bit more. And this will probably be the best situation. And then they play the chess game, and as the chess game goes on, Bones and Booth basically just ask questions about the lore of Falaria, and basically Messian just answers their questions. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be a big story. It'd just be like, here's certain things, like, what do we know about these characters, or this world, or this group of people. it would be a neat little info dump for people not really interested in finding out about Falaria, because because the website Falaria is not exactly the easiest website to navigate, because it's just very, very cumbersome. Like, the website kind of operates like SCP website, but SCP is like way better UI and stuff like that. But I think this would make the most sense of just giving us as much info about the lore and the world building. Like, just use it as a way to build the world of Falaria. Give us as much information on the characters and stuff as possible. Like, okay, you want to know about Messes? Here's Messes' story. Like, you can do just simple abridged versions of their stories. Like, and maybe and use that as a segue to like the actual sequel. Have this be a inter-equal, and then this big sequel. Like, you have the Falarians actually going into Brennan's world. You could have, I don't know, I want to see more Kai. If there's two members of Falaria I actually want to see like assume human forms, it would probably be Kai and Relena, because honestly, I want to see Relena and Sweets. I want to see them together, and hell, bring Natalie along if you want, and she can be like the whole. I would actually like to see a hilarious version of like the whole talk with the boyfriend, like Natalie's talk right next to Sweets, like, all right, just know that if you do anything to my daughter, yes, I know you'll kick me. You'll kick my ass and break my waist. Oh, I didn't mean me. You know who I mean, Mr. Sweets. Your daughter? Mm-hmm. Where this story goes from here, because it's very obvious. Like I said, the last two chapters of the story was basically one gigantic sequel hook. Where it goes from here, who knows? But I still at least would want to see an info dump story, like an in-betweenquel, just filling in, and not to mention, it would be like an easy way to set up the sequel of just Messian just showing up at Booth and Bones' house with Lily, challenging to a chess game, because he did promise her a chess game. Who knows? Like, you can easily use that as an excuse to just build as much lore as you can, and reveal to the reader, to people who are not interested in buying the mangas. Honestly, why the hell would you want to buy mangas in that? Yeah. But yeah, that's my review on Dynamic Equilibrium. This was a very well done story, and I do love it. I don't love it as much as Fusion of Destinies, but I do love it. The next video I will do will be, I actually have to redo a video, and after that, I will be doing an update video where I actually do an update thing and a bunch of suggestions, stuff like that. So, this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.